change and transformation should be embedded into organizations. There should be a director of transformation, a director of change. Even if that's not a full-time job, it is someone's responsibility.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and at IPM, our job is to make sure your organization is one of them. With each episode, our goal is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from across the nonprofit sector. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Melissa Cowley Wolf. Thank you for joining me for another episode in this series on grounded leadership. In my work as a strategic advisor to nonprofits and an executive coach, I see that everything comes down to leadership. In an era of massive global change and paradigm shifts, no amount of strategic planning will lead to success unless we foster grounded, self-aware, and supported leaders. The challenge for many nonprofits is that they're too invested in the status quo. Leaders often find themselves focused on protecting existing programs, funding streams, and organizational models, even when the environment around them has fundamentally changed. So the question is, how do nonprofit leaders know when it's time to stay the course and when it's time to rethink the way their organization operates? That's what we will try to answer today. My guest today is Brian Loevner, executive leader, consultant, producer, fundraiser, and founder of BLVE Consults. Throughout his career, Brian has helped organizations navigate growth, change, partnerships, restructuring, and long-term stability. He's raised millions of dollars, led major nonprofit institutions, and worked with organizations facing some of their most difficult strategic decisions. In this episode, we'll explore what grounded leadership looks like during times of uncertainty. Brian, my friend, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
It's great to be with you. I love being in conversation with you, and I know our listeners will learn a lot from you today. So, ready to jump in?
Ready.
So, we're in an interesting funding landscape and a very unpredictable world. Given all of that, what would you say are the biggest challenges or the biggest challenge facing nonprofit leaders today?
I think it's a handful of things that work in collaboration. I think the reality is executive directors, leaders of nonprofit organizations throughout pretty much all industries are overwhelmed and beyond their capacity to do the work that's necessary to sustain their organizations long term. They have smaller staffs, they have less donors, they have funding structures that are changing and shifting, which often means less funding while that change happens. And they're navigating a world that has a significant number of unknowns. And so the needs of our clients as nonprofits are changing. So if you were to ask me specifically, what are the things? I would say it's adaptation. Executive directors, executive leaders, boards, staffs really struggle with adaptation and change. They need to be able to engage in a process that they're not currently in when they're already over capacity as an organization. People ask me, why don't leaders change? Why don't they just adapt? And that's the reason. The reason is their world is at 110% capacity. Change takes time. It takes effort. It takes process. It takes commitment. It takes brain space. And leaders and boards and staffs don't have that in this moment. So what else is feeding that situation? Reactivity. We as organizations have become reactive instead of proactive. You know, we haven't gone and asked the questions of our community. We simply wait for them to be dissatisfied or upset or move to a different organization's services. When programs become mature, when our work becomes mature and we feel confidence in it, we're like, okay, we don't have to change because things are mature and good and people like our work. Well, that's the moment where I think adaptation is most necessary. Transformation is most necessary because our world and our programs and our staff and our leadership is an ecology. Things are born things adapt, things become mature, things are destructed and changed and repurposed and reborn.
It also has to do, to me, with the largest generational wealth transfer in history is upon us. That's been a focus of my work. And for the last decade, it's something that we knew would happen in the future, even though it was happening underneath us. But now it is really upon us. We're seeing that shift within the philanthropy landscape, the family office foundation landscape, but also in how donors are reacting to organizations, which leads me to your reactivity. How organizations are reactive. They see this data and they see these statistics, or they potentially lose a donor or can't understand why they're not able to attract more donors, especially those rising generation donors. So they get super reactive instead of going out and listening. And it's in that process of dialogue and understanding that we're in a change scenario. And the best way to adapt through it is to listen to our communities. What is needed? What do people want?
Yeah.
And that can be really hard when 24 hours a day you're inundated with everything that comes from running an organization.
I think the reality is, funding is not just in a normal cyclical sort of change. I think because of what's happened in the financial world, who is wealthy has changed so much in this country, and so much in this world that there needs to be a whole new strategy for how we support our charitable sector. There's no longer a straight line that is well-grooved and well-worn, and money flows down that line on a regular basis. We've had that with the Ford Foundation, with the MacArthur Foundation, with these big foundations that have been supporting, and they're no longer going to be the largest foundations. And we have to figure out how to adapt to that. And the only answer, Melissa, is listening to people and then putting the right minds in the room to assess that data that you gather and figure out strategies to move forward. And that takes time and effort. And each organization's answer, this sucks, will be different. There's not going to be one answer for any big sector of the charitable world. We're not going to come up with one like, oh, well, now we should fund this way. No, it's going to be a torrent of ideas that eventually will turn into a stream of ideas. It's going to take 100 different ways to fund things, 1,000, 1,000,000, to get to the 50 that work for the next 4 generations, or whatever it is. And that to me is why we should stop talking about organizations should change or should transform and start talking about change and transformation should be embedded into organizations.
I love that idea.
There should be a director of transformation, a director of change. Even if that's not a full-time job, it is someone's responsibility to every 3 months look at the model, listen, and adapt.
You just named some opportunities that we have amidst these challenges. Listening, the idea of having someone in there who, I love this, the director of transformation, whose sole job it is to assess the landscape and assess how the organization is not reacting, but responding and listening, and therefore leading through these massive transformations. Yeah. What are some other opportunities that are available to nonprofits or that you've seen for the groups that want to innovate and adapt the way that they approach strategy and funding?
Yeah, so there's a couple of really good resources out there for organizations that are ready to start changing as a process in their organization, right? That really want to sustain their change in some way. There are funds now throughout the United States. There's one in Chicago through Forefront, which is a service organization in Illinois. It's actually all of Illinois, not just Chicago. There's a fund through the state of New York. There's a fund through the Los Angeles City Council. There's funds all through other parts of North America, in Toronto, in Calgary, in Edmonton. I know there's a fund in Atlanta. I know there's a fund in Dallas. So And I know some of this because I work in a group called the Sustained Collaboration Collective, which is a group of advisors and rabble rousers, I would say, who spend a lot of time talking about change and trying to encourage organizations and provide resources for organizations to consider change and transformation. So I would encourage people to look up the Sustained Collaboration Network, and there's a list of funds that are out there on their website. There's also there are models to look at, organizations we can look at that have actually adapted and changed really, really well, and we should look at them as a model and see how they did that, right? Not that we should all do what they did, but like there's things to learn there, and we're starting to really get some solid data out there, and I think there's organizations. I would have to look Arts Alliance, Americans for the Arts, and a couple of others that I know are doing it in the arts industry, in the healthcare industry. There's, I'll have to.
We'll put it all in the show notes for the listeners.
Yeah, we'll put it all in the show notes. But there's a couple of other industries that have very specifically started looking at the models for sustained transformation of organizations. Some of them are looking at them from the lens of collaboration, like mergers, partnerships, co-location, like things of that nature. Some of them are looking at them from the lens of bringing in new financial programs, like new income generating programs, new revenue streams, long-term economic development. So there's a number of different viewpoints that you can find some data on, and we'll provide all those links for you.
Yeah.
So those are some other examples of what we see. Now, when we come to like actual organizations, because I want to get down to sort of brass tacks here.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorite transformation stories is about gun violence prevention in Illinois. There were multiple organizations doing similar advocacy work in Illinois around gun violence prevention. People should know, listeners should know, Illinois has the strictest gun laws pretty much in the country when it comes to state laws. And so gun violence prevention advocacy is a big business in Illinois. And there was a reality that the overlapping work that was happening between these organizations was actually stymieing all of their opportunities to raise money and sustain long term. One organization realized they had to change. They started changing. They went to the other organizations and said, we all need to change if we're going to survive because the laws have changed. We have a governor now who agrees with us instead of disagrees with us. So like how we function is different now, right? We actually have advocates in the governor's mansion, not, enemies. And so they made a point to start to collaborate with each other. It started as a co-location agreement where they all rented an office space together and started telling each other what they were doing over the water cooler, which then became a back room collaboration, HR, accounting, these things. And then 2 years later, it became a full merger and a brand new organization called One AIM Illinois. It was these two large gun violence prevention organizations coming together to create all of the levels of support that they could provide in one place for the state of Illinois. And they've now become the largest statewide gun violence prevention organization in the country. So it's really about figuring out how to transform your organization to maximize your impact, not to minimize your pain. Because I think so many people try to change to go, well, this hurts, so let's change so that it doesn't hurt as much. And to me, it should be more about, well, we're not having very big impact with this work that we're doing. So let's get rid of the thing that's causing pain and create new impact.
And sometimes the thing causing the pain is the very structure itself.
Yeah. So break it down.
Yep. And that merger is a way to enhance and provide a pathway for that sustained transformation.
Yeah. And I want to say one more thing about transformation in that, and I want to go back to something I said earlier around capacity. I think that one of the first things I do with any organization that I work with is talk about organizational capacity. And I think that if every leader took an hour themselves and an hour with their top 5 staff members that they work closest with and did red light, green light, yellow light to their job description, red light being, I shouldn't be doing this. Yellow light, I should be doing this and I should be doing it in collaboration with someone else. Or green light, this is highest and best use of me. And just walk through their actual job description, not the one they were hired with, but like the one they know is their actual job. And they went through and did that and then shared that with their top 5 staff members. And everybody did it together for an hour. You would find something, I swear, you would find something that you could all stop doing or that all of you are doing overlapping each other. For this organization, for One Aim, for the collaboration with gun violence prevention, it was around telling the board to back off. They had monthly, sometimes twice a month meetings with the board scheduled. The amount of work the organization was doing to prepare for each of those board meetings was overtaking the work that they were doing in gun violence advocacy. When the executive director and the entire team said to the board, what we need most is capacity, and we're spending 8 hours a month preparing for board meetings. If we could get those 8 hours back, we could go change into a different kind of organization. The board went, absolutely, we're backing off. 2 board meetings a year for 2 years. That's it. They got updates by email in between. They could ask questions if they had them. But like there was the meeting structure, the prep, the stress, the panic was gone. And they used those hours to change. So capacity, capacity, capacity.
You and I talk a lot as fellow consultants in our conversations about what organizations want us there to do, and then what actually happens when we come in through the door. Because we can do all the strategic planning all day, every day. But if there is not the assessment of the capability and capacity of the team to carry that out, and that is a process that never comes up or is never acknowledged, even if we see it coming in, then the strategic plan is going to sit on the shelf because the organization doesn't have the ability to carry it out. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little bit about the sense of ego that can permeate our organizations that'll prevent us from taking on those mergers or those partnerships that you've seen can radically change the impact on our communities?
There's a reality in leadership in the nonprofit world right now that there's a sense that if the executive director wants to change, that's the only voice that's necessary for us to move forward. And that's just not true. Change takes leadership at all levels. It takes leadership at organizational level, programmatic level, and like board level, and then community level. That's the only way change can actually happen. And we have run into a problem in our industry with ego. And I'm not just talking about executive leaders, I'm talking about boards as well. The concept of NIMBY, right? Like not in my backyard. This has permeated nonprofit boards for decades. This idea that I won't do that while I'm on the board. That can't happen while I'm on the board. This kind of change, this kind of potential upheaval, this kind of transformation can't happen on my watch. And this desire for the status quo that boards have trickled down to our organizations is a pandemic in and of itself. What it has allowed is executive directors to live in this world of strength and like leadership, but within such a small bubble, right? They can't get out of this small bubble because of the board's inactivity or inability to see beyond the current structure. So that's one way we look at ego, is with the board.
Do you think that's because a lot of folks on the boards come from the corporate world where merger has a very different meaning?
100%. Like that's what we're talking about. You and I've said this many times. Like, I don't understand why the local architect gets to decide who runs the big healthcare nonprofit in town. Like, why is the board president of the organization the one who gets to decide, who leads this community, right? Like, why have we given boards this power? That's not the right person to decide. Yeah, money, exactly, right? But that's not the right person. These aren't the right people. Some of them are fine because they're part of the community, but like there should be experts who are involved in these decisions. And so often that's just not the case. And certainly our staffs aren't involved in these decisions. And they're the ones that have to work with the person every day. So, I think there's a whole situation there with boards and the way they're structured and their power dynamic. But here's the key, and organizations often don't actually know this. None of that is part of law. The board is not required to be in charge of hiring and firing the leaders of the organization. The board is not required to have yes, no check boxes for whether programs move forward each year. They are actually only required to do a very small handful of things as a board. So if you have an organization that is overwhelmed by your board's power structure, first off, I have empathy for you because that is a hard situation to be in, but that is actually not the law. That is a choice that your organization has made through its bylaws to give your board that power. And it can easily be removed from the bylaws by vote of the board. So this is not a structural organizational problem that is every industry. This is every organization was like, oh, I'll take the bylaws from that other organization and I'll just have my board sign them. And we gave them the same power. Everybody gave everybody the same power because our funders wanted it, because our funders wanted copies of our bylaws and they wanted to see certain things in our bylaws. And they, it's a whole, I would say, don't get me started, but you got me started. So it's your own fault at this point.
But here's a great opportunity to, you open this up to mention a great opportunity is we've had these board structures for so long because these are the leaders who have built and sustained our organizations, and they deserve our utmost gratitude for that. But we are going through a huge shift across every level of society. And so going back to this idea of listening, there's this opportunity for leaders, and not just the executive directors, but the leaders of every level of the organization, to meet and listen to the next generation of potential leaders. And how did they view governance? How do they see that role? How do they want to participate in it? And how can they partner with us to make those necessary shifts so that we become adaptable, proactive, and we're in a constant cycle of listening? And so we need to look at who is governing our organizations and how can we create diversity in every single way onto that board. And it's a great opportunity now amidst this wealth transfer to partner rising board members with those that are in, towards the end of their board service, so they can meet and learn from each other. And there can be some mentorship because the traditional generation has a lot to teach, right? But it is time for a younger generation to take the reins so that we are not in a position of being reactive. And one of the things you and I both work with leaders on is we need to get ahead of stuff. We're going to get you in the mindset where you are able to implement techniques of groundedness so that you can be strategic and you can be proactive. And the solution to a lot of the structural issues we have, I think, lies, as you've said, in the structure of our governance, in our governing body. And so there's a great opportunity now. And I hope listeners take away, this idea that you perpetuate, which is getting ahead of it.
Yeah. And I think that is the key. The key is that if you are bringing in a consultant every 3 years to do, or 4 years to do a strategic planning process, building a strategic plan, and then, sending it to all your funders. And then every year you guys get together for half hour and talk about it. And and then at the end of 4 years, you're like, okay, we made some, we didn't make others. Let's get another strategic plan. That's an antiquated process. It's not time to build bricks that we put on our desks that look pretty and say strategic plan on the side of them. I mean, what we need is a new plan every 3 months. We need a new plan every 6 months. We need a culture of planning. Cancel 3 other meetings that happen every month and put a 90-minute planning meeting every month.
Yes.
And pull out the documents, the structures, the tools that you've put in place because you hired you hired Melissa or what, and you put the right tools in place, and you pull out those tools and you do your exercises to see where you are, right? You make the adaptations, you make changes, you make shifts, you gather data, and then you make decisions based on that. And then a month later, you look at how those decisions went, right? That's the reality of change in this moment, is if you're not, sort of always managing a number of different change processes, then you're probably falling behind. Leaders need to also understand that it's okay not to lead everything. I'm working with a leader right now who I deeply respect, but struggles with the concept of allowing others to lead anything. And these are extremely experienced others in the company. We're talking about, accomplished folks, and this leader has 5 or 6 different change processes going, but is trying to lead them all. And that goes back to what we talked about a little bit around ego. Leaders have to understand that their vision is not the only vision, that their vision is actually already a shared vision because of who they're around. And they need to understand when it's time to step back and embrace potential failure, embrace something different that someone else might do, and understand that that's part of the process of running an organization.
There's so much strength in delegating. That's why putting together a thoughtful staffing strategy is essential. And that's part of that assessment, that organizational assessment and capacity assessment. You must delegate.
Mm-hmm.
What is a hard truth, in your opinion, that nonprofit leaders, development teams need to grapple with if they are to sustain and grow their organization's impact?
I think one of the hard truths that leaders need to understand is that no nonprofit was created to last forever. There are a few that have lasted over 75 years or 100 years even. Maybe have gone back all the way till the structure existed, but that's a tiny handful. So remember that we have a life cycle as an organization. If we can remember that no matter how important we think the work that we are doing is, that others are also doing important work, and that the hard truth is there might be others that are doing the work better, smarter, different, serving community better than we are.
Yes.
If we can bring ourselves to think in that way and bring ourselves to see the value of others, I think there's a lot that could be gained in the nonprofit world, because we have to remember our vision, our mission is not to stay afloat. Our mission is to serve community. That's why we're nonprofits. So if we're not doing it as well as somebody else, we should probably talk about that.
Brian, what are some other bits of important advice for steps that all leaders across the organization can take, department heads and aspiring leaders could take right now to begin to address the challenges that we're facing?
It's a great question. And I think the answer is similar for most, which is if you're leading a program or an operation at your organization, there's no reason that you can't take the time to iterate and change and transform the work that you're doing. Now, obviously, you need the support of your executive leader. You need the support of your staff and your team to do this, and you would treat it just as you would as if you were running an organization. I would speak to my executive director as I would to my board, right? And say, here are a process that I'd like to go through with my team, right? I'd like to use these tools that Melissa Cowley Wolf gave me the last time I saw her for coffee. And I want to take my team through this process and see if we can find a better way to do what we do, or other ways to do what we do, or someone to help us do what we do.
I love that.
We can't always swing as big as we want to because of capacity, because of money, because of time, because of staff, because of programs, because of our board. So what can leaders of programs, what can staff members who have a function that could transform or change do to create a small experiment with radical intent? And the radical intent part is that we want to propagate the change that we make. That the idea is if we found a way for this program to function better, that means that assessing other programs likely will find better ways to activate those programs. So the radical intent is that I'm not just doing this for myself. I'm actually secretly doing it for everybody. That's my radical intent, is to show my boss, show my board, show my coworkers, my fellow director level, whatever it is, that this kind of change, this kind of structured, strategic, thoughtful, could all go into empathetic and trauma-informed, but we won't, change is important and can be propagated.
Love it. Love it. Talked about a lot of challenges, and it could stay hard to stay optimistic and hopeful. But especially in the nonprofit industry, we need to be, because our work is all about community and impact and making change in society, and hope and optimism are essential in that work. I want to ask you, what makes you the most hopeful? What gives you the most hope about philanthropy today?
A couple things. I think that there's more money in the system than I feel like there's ever been.
Amen.
And so there should be more charitable money in the system. Second, I'm excited by DAFs, donor advised funds. I think it's an unknown, untapped, Wild Westy kind of funding structure that no one has really figured out the right model yet to serve the charitable sector effectively. Right now, it serves the donor very effectively. I don't think it serves the charitable sector very effectively yet. And I think that's an untapped, possibly massive waterfall of money if we can figure out the right way to do that. And then third is the work that you're doing, Melissa, which is like trying to teach people that it's okay to do things differently in the next generation, and to take the learnings from the past generation and to adapt and change into a new, effective funding structure for our charitable sector. This is the first generation of big donors that were raised on screens. They weren't raised going to the theater as much. They weren't raised going to dance concerts. They weren't raised using the nonprofit structure, the charitable structure, arts or otherwise, as much as in the past. And so their understanding of its need is different. They can understand why cancer charities need money, but understanding why the local, health clinic needs to be endowed rather than run on a month-to-month structure maybe doesn't make perfect sense to them. So those are the things that give me hope,
Yeah.
I have deep belief in the power of the nonprofit sector. I think there is no question to me of its viability, of its necessity in every industry that it lives in. But it does need to change. And by changing, I think we'll become more viable and powerful for the future.
Anything else you want to add, Brian?
I think that the last thing I'll say is that leaders should take a deep breath and remember self-care and take a moment to step outside and touch grass and remember that their work is the second most important thing, because they have to be more important themselves than the work they do. And good luck to everyone.
Brian, I learned so much from you. I admire your work and your dedication to this sector. And it's always so great to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much. If listeners want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can reach out to me through my website at blveconsults.com. And my email address is right on the website there. So just feel free to drop me a note.
Wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes for our listeners to get in touch with you. Thank you again. Brian Loevner, founder and president of BLVE Consults. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
As always, my thanks to Russ Faniff for sharing hosting duties with me. Thanks to our fantastic producer, Curtis Schmidt. And thanks to you, the NPFX listeners for tuning in. I'm excited to bring you more interviews with other great guests like Brian. So until then, breathe so you can align purpose, performance, and well-being.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you'd like to learn more about any of today's guests or resources, we'll include links in the show notes. If you like our podcast, please help spread the word. First, subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward episodes you like to friends and colleagues or post them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help share these conversations with more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners find us, and they also help us understand what you like most about NPFX. Finally, we'd love to hear your suggestions. If there's a challenge you're facing, a question you have, or a voice you think the nonprofit sector needs to hear, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. The Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange is just that, an exchange, and we're grateful that you're part of it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.